special called meeting to approve them. So maybe we'll have all three of our members here. Is that okay with you, Councilor Woods?
That is acceptable.
Okay, so we will delay approval of the minutes. Item 3 is our first zoning item, first and only.
Right. Good afternoon, councilors. Kim Spurl. I serve as zoning administrator in PEP. Our zoning case is ZAC 2022-16, and these include proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance, including revisions to opioid replacement therapy treatment facilities and the addition of medical cannabis. So you guys are well aware that the state of Alabama adopted legislation that authorizes the cultivation, processing, and sales of cannabis products for medical use. Because the city council, you guys very recently, on October 4th, did adopt an ordinance to authorize the operation of those facilities within the city of Birmingham. Subject to the strict regulation and oversight of the Alabama Medical Cannabis Commission. So we call that the AMCC for short. So the text changes that are before you today, they are adding the terms from that legislation to the zoning ordinance. We've added medical cannabis cultivator, dispensary, integrated facility, processor, secure transporter, and state testing laboratory. And then we have also added to the permitted uses table where those facilities will be permitted with conditions. And then if you flip through, you'll see our entire definition section in the ordinance, and we actually define all of those terms that I just mentioned. And then we have the permitted with conditions section where we have listed out each of those terms, the zoning classifications where they will be permitted, and the conditions are pretty much the same for all of the activities. They will require, what we will require of the applicants is a statement from the AMCC that the facility meets all the requirements that they have. And then our second condition just states that that particular use has to operate within the provisions of that section of the Alabama State Code. The Alabama State Code has several requirements for each of the different types of facilities, so we thought it would be best to stick with what their requirements were. And the map that you see, you guys have a small 11 by 17 in the larger map, and that's related to the dispensary locations. The state legislation does restrict the proximity to schools, daycares, or child care facilities. Dispensaries cannot be within 1,000 feet of those locations. And so our GIS team was able to map those locations so we could get an idea of the parts of the city that would be available to house those dispensaries.
Does that include private schools or just city schools?
I believe, yeah, he did private and public. It did not include colleges or universities. And I was telling the counselor earlier, we used the daycares and child cares that are actual, what we call legal to operate in the city. They're the facilities that are actually permitted, and we have a record that they are able to operate. So there could be some facilities that we're not aware of that have not come to receive their proper permitting from us. So those, we'd have to take those into consideration, as those would be enforcement cases to get them to come into compliance. But we only track the legal facilities in the city. So that's what's reflected on the map.
Okay, so if we know of private schools that apparently are not shown on here, we should turn them into whom to make
No,
sure?
if we miss something on the map, you can let staff know, you can let us know, and we can check with our GIS team and see what might have happened with that location. Is there one you can see?
Well, yeah, the Glen Iris Baptist Church has had a school for as long as I can remember, and they block off the streets and do all kinds of stuff over there, and they don't appear to be marked on here. Epic School and Glen Iris Elementary School are all within a half a block
Right.
of that school, but it's like a little school district of its own.
We'll check on that one.
Okay, yeah, because they've been operating so long, I can't imagine that the city wouldn't know that they're there, especially since they block off the streets and make everybody mad.
Yeah, I was going to say, Julie Bernard from Office of City Attorney, I was going to say, the map, I had asked PP if they would do a map, because knowing how many schools and daycares and everything there are in the city, it was like, is this going to be like one big mass of overlapping, and where, can they go? I mean, I think it is going to be on the applicant if it's something, as Kim said, that we don't have mapped because it's not legal under our ordinance for daycares, then, but it exists, that's going to be on the applicant to deal with the state on, and then, as we find out about it, it would be an enforcement case. Kind of same things with schools. If we don't have them on that map is not just absolutely this is where they can go. It was just to get a general idea of how much the radii for the schools and daycares were going to affect areas that they could go. So.
Okay, well, thank you.
And then the final change is just the opioid replacement therapy treatment facilities were previously allowed as special exceptions, and we have actually, we're proposing to amend those to permitted with conditions. The city, there was a ZBA case last year, and the city the decision was appealed and the city was sued, and so it's been the recommendation that we treat those facilities as we would our other medical facilities, that we remove the spacing requirements that we previously had for those facilities under the ADA law.
So this was due to a lawsuit that we lost or we settled?
It was a settlement, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and we settled on allowing them in MUH, MUD, C2, I1, and I2.
They were previously allowed in those districts. They were just subject to a special exception approved by the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and they were also subject to spacing requirements. The spacing requirements are on the very last page. We struck through that section indicating that we are removing it. But we previously did not allow them within 1,000 linear feet of an E or R zone property, a church, other place of worship, public park, kindergarten, elementary, high school, college, university, or other similar type of school, 3,000 feet of another substance dispensing facility, and then 1,000 feet of our historic districts and commercial revitalization districts.
So now they can just kind of go anywhere?
They do still...
In those districts?
Yes, and that's correct. And they will still have to submit to us a statement that they do comply with all of the county and state requirements for those facilities.
Well, the big complaints that we had were the patients or clients hovering around in the neighborhood and doing things while they were, I guess, waiting for their medications. And so, I guess nobody in the court system lives near any of these kind of places, so.
Councilor Julie Bernard again. I think part of the concern was we didn't have good evidence-based reasons when we adopted that ordinance. That's kind of what came out in the course, of the research for the litigation. It doesn't mean we can't restrict them. We need some firm, solid evidence of it. Something more than one person watching it for a couple of days and saying this is what happened, which was kind of what the testimony was at the time. So if we have some good, solid evidence and study that we can support for why we need to restrict them further, we can. But for right now, this is the recommendation of the litigation team who handled the case.
Well, that's interesting. I guess, I'm remembering all the complaints we got from nearby people, but they must not have come to the hearing when we made the decision because, well, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's over. You'll have to wait for new problems. So, Councilor Woods, do you have any questions about any of the changes? One of the opioid replacement centers was in your district, one of the two that had a lot of problems, so I don't know how that worked out.
So on the opioid thing, we are completely striking that from this zoning code and just amending the permitted use table.
So we're actually moving it from the section that requires approval by the Zoning Board of Adjustment to the section that permits it with conditions. So staff would be able to review a business license, and if the applicant could provide the evidence that they meet the Jefferson County and the state requirements, then staff could approve that license versus having to go through the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
And the issue was somebody got denied for one?
That's correct. The request was a special exception for the location and a variance because they could not meet those spacing requirements. And the special exception was granted. However, the board did not grant the variance for the spacing requirements. And for that particular case, you can't have one without the other, if that makes sense.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Well, I wanted to ask, the parts that have been added are in red. What are the parts that are in blue and underlined? Is that added?
They're not, yeah, for some reason, every time we resave the document, it converts the text to highlight those. It did the same thing. If we send it electronically, it's not highlighted in blue, but when I printed it out, it was. So please just ignore those.
Well, it was all about bakery items, so I wasn't really worried that we were going to be baking medical.
Yeah, I think what Microsoft Word wants us to do is make cupcakes 2 words.
Yeah, well, maybe so, but they don't like bread or cupcakes.
Yes, Microsoft Word is definitely discriminating against pastries.
Well, and then seating.
Yeah.
They don't want you to sit on the bread or the cupcake.
But we will have that corrected for the full council.
Okay, well, it'll just keep somebody like me from asking questions.
Right, so the only colors, the red and underlined, are the additions, and then there's a strike through in black for any deletions.
They're trying to tell the city that normally underlined in blue is what you've added, and red and marked through is normally what you've removed.
Yeah, it might want us to change colors.
Because we're odd, in the way we do things.
That's what it is.
It's untracked. We had the same issue last night at ZAC. Yeah, and I resaved it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love track changes. When you accept the changes, normally they go away, but not with us. Anyway, so the other question is, everything in red is the official language from the state of Alabama. So every city will have the same language in their ordinance as, all our definitions and everything. They all come from the state.
They will generally follow it. I mean, I just caught one thing where we referenced something about the rules, and we've referenced the Alabama state code rather than the administrative code, and we need to clean some things up. And I mean, exactly the way they word it in their regulations are not exactly the way, that, I mean, we've tracked what they say, but there's some references and things like that are not going to be identical to the way they do it, because they're referring internally to their things and we're referring to their documents from ours. So there's a few things like that. But yes, generally, I don't know what other cities are going to do about zoning. I don't know, what they're going to do. But the only thing the cities were given specific regulatory authority for was zoning for dispensaries. But obviously, if you're going to be a business in the city, you have to comply with our zoning anyway. So that's why we went ahead and put everything in there and just made them all, permitted with conditions. So we are putting them in the districts that are like districts for those types of operation, and but they've got to comply with all of the security and all the requirements that the state has put on them as far as their facilities.
Okay, and our opioid replacement, they no longer have to have a special exception like a hospital or a medical lab. They just get to be there.
Are they required? Are those facilities required to have special exceptions?
In certain districts, they are.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on the second to the last page, and it says uses permitted by special exception, and hospital and medical lab are there, but we have crossed out opioid replacement therapy treatment.
And Councilor Abbott, I would add that we are going to be doing an overhaul of the ordinance as it relates to compliance with ADA law. So some of that might actually change in the near future.
Yeah, there are cases out there that, if you require certain things to get permits where it may affect people who have ADA issues and you don't require other similar things, you've got some discrimination issues, is I guess the simplest way. Making something that has some ADA protections go through additional hoops that other things don't have to go through is an issue, can be an issue.
For example? I'm just trying to imagine what.
Yeah, well, the
issues.
The opioid therapy. I mean, that was one of the issues that we were dealing with, was that they were a medical facility. Now that's a question. I don't know. We will look at that. I was talking with Ms. Thomas. That we were trying to push this through quickly, but we're probably going to take a little more time to look at it because we had some issues that came up, with some other people looking at it. So we will look at that.
And I will add, Attorney Bernard, when I participated in the mediation for the opioid facility, and it was brought to our attention that there are medical offices, there are pain management clinics that are operating as medical offices. That's just an accessory use to what some of their services are. And they actually prescribe some of the same medications that are prescribed at some of the opioid treatment facilities. So it was kind of brought to our attention that we're treating the opioid treatment facilities, as Attorney Bernard said, in a special class separate from what you could get at another similar type establishment. And so there are several other examples that they brought to our attention, and that's what led us not only to this, but the necessity that we need to look at the entire ordinance in regards to ADA accommodation and compliance.
Okay. Well, Councilor Woods, do you have any further thoughts or questions?
It feels like there's a handful of changes that need to get made. And I don't really want to list all the changes.
Are y'all going to bring it back, or are these going to be changes that won't matter to to us from a planning and zoning standpoint?
I think the majority of the changes, we just need to verify that we've referenced the correct state code and the definitions. But none of the substantive changes, like where they're allowed, where we're permitting them, none of those should change.
Right. I think, the overall approach in policy is not going to change. Now, if there is a detail, if we found something, and we had some discussions, because after, Ms. Thomas looked at some of it in detail, she had some questions for us, and we've, between the four of us, we've had some discussions and emails, today to confirm. We can restrict them, as long as we can have a reason for it. And we discussed heavily, like, not having them in B1, C1, neighborhood, retail, just neighborhood business, because, and I think we can justify that because, we define those businesses as being things that, just kind of serve the locality. And these, because of the restrictions on the numbers and where they can go in the state, they are going to serve larger areas and regional, not just neighborhoods. It's not going to be just your little independent pharmacy on the corner that everybody in that neighborhood kind of goes to. This would be something that would pull people from a larger area. So I think we can justify that they don't fit that neighborhood business area. So we can say, don't put them there. So, so as long as we've got something that we can defend, then...
Okay, and in the new ordinance, that would be the mixed use low and medium that they would not be allowed to be in. And then they could go in.
And the C1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the things that would be kind of equivalent to what was the B1 that, that we would restrict those kinds of activities, because I don't know how these things are going to be. They're limited in who can go into them. I believe I, maybe said that either at, council or at public safety. The state restricts who can go in. This is not, you can just walk down the street and go, well, let's go see what's in the marijuana shop today. You have to be a card-carrying patient or caregiver. You've got to have that card certified from a physician that you either have one of the qualified medical conditions or you're an authorized caregiver for someone who does, to be able to go in and purchase the products. So it's not just general. They also restrict that they can't have more people inside the facility than the staff that's there can kind of keep an eye on and manage. So, if you got two people, running the counter dispensing, you can't have 15 people in there that they can't keep their eyes on, essentially.
So how is that going to be policed? Are they going to buzz people in when they can come? Or, I don't know enough about this to be intelligent, but if you have, let's say you have 5 people working inside and 10 people want to get in.
Yeah.
How are you going to stop them? If they all come in and you ask them to leave and they say, I'm not leaving, who are the police in this thing?
Well, the state, and they have to give their plans when they apply to the state. They have to have the plan about how they're going to handle all these things. So
maybe be like Baskin Robbins, where you take a number.
Maybe. Maybe they could have like a place that people have to come in and identify themselves, and then they're led into another area. I just don't know how they're going to. I don't have any experience with it. And I just know that the state regulations require them to have all these things, and they have to lay that out. And I will, repeat, and there was one thing Dr. Black asked yesterday at the ZAC meeting, and I wished we had discussion about it because Ms. Thomas asked about it today. The state regulations require them to show that they've had some kind of community engagement. So even though the city doesn't have the ability to scrutinize every applicant and everything like we do, say, with an alcohol license, they are required to show the state that they've made some kind of engagement with the local community. So we've discussed again, I don't think we can dictate to the state what they necessarily take, but I think we can have some guidelines that kind of follow what our general engagement is for other things, just so, neighborhoods, communities, counselors, whoever, know that they're planning to locate. And so that is one thing. And again, through this whole process, they will, in 2 weeks, this past Monday was the deadline for people to ask for an application. And there's over, according to their website, they've had over 600 requests. Now that's broken down, between the different types of licenses. Dispensary was the highest request of like 239. And as I calculate it, there's a maximum of 37 that will be allowed statewide. Monday was the deadline for that. This coming Monday, they will start sending those applications to the people who ask for them. And the following Monday on Halloween is the day that they can start making their applications to the commission. And the deadline for doing that is December 30th. They have some time to make some adjustments in the first part of the year. On April 13th, the commission is to meet, and they will consider any amendments, adjustments, anything that people have made to their applications in March. They will consider those, they will consider everything that's been submitted, and they will vote on the ones that they deem as being complete, ready to move forward, and they will deem them as submitted as of April 13th of next year. And the next day opens a 30-day comment period. The commission is supposed to post the redacted applications on their website. So, this is the point, that's the point that we definitely need to be watching to see who's applied to be in Birmingham. And, of course, it's a public comment period. Anybody could make an individual personal comment about anything. If the city wants to make any comments on them, I would suggest that between the mayor's office and the council and the administrative staff that we get together so that we speak as one voice, for the city, or that we at least have a way of any official comments that the city might want to make on any applications. So, but that 30-day comment period is the opportunity, for the city to scrutinize and say something about the applicants if we have any issues with them.
So when they make their application, are they going to designate the address where they want to put their facility so we'll know where all of them want to go?
Yes, and that's why we wanted to move this, get this moving, because they have that December 30th deadline to make their application to the state. I don't know how it will work, like if they're still kind of in limbo on December 29th and they go ahead and submit their application, they still have that period in March maybe to clear that up with the commission. But that's why we wanted to try to get, make a statement about our zoning early on, or as early as we could. I won't say we're early with it, but as early as we could.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, I'm not concerned about the people who need medical marijuana. I'm concerned about the criminals, lurking. I don't like lurkers.
Right, and that, the state requires them to have video technology surveillance. It's got some specifications in there about how long they have to keep it and all of that kind of thing. Again, they're not allowed to just allow anybody to come in. I think they've got to have, some ways to contact police or somebody quickly. I've read so many pieces of it, some stuff kind of blurs together. We were looking at the transporter today, and I think it was the transporter we were looking at, but it talks about they have to have some provision in their plan about how if their truck breaks down on the side of the road, they've got to let Aaliyah know, and they've, hey, medical marijuana truck broken down on the side of the road, we need state trooper out here, we need, so they're required to take some steps. And, we've talked about, like at the dispensaries, the parking, they're supposed to have dedicated parking, or exclusive parking, I think, for their people. Obviously, with a standalone, that's not an issue. We've had some discussion about how that works with our parking requirements for like a strip mall or something like that, because the state allows them to locate in a strip area, but they've also got to have other, it talks about fencing. I don't know why you'd want to go there, and I think there are some exceptions, like if you're in a strip mall, as to what you have to do, but they have some pretty heavy security requirements with
Good.
them.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yes. So
It's the fear of the unknown.
it is, and but looking at the state regulations, they had those kinds of provisions in there, so it was like not necessary for us to duplicate, necessarily all of that in the zoning. And again, it's not like this is going to be something that somebody can apply to be on every corner and do. As I said, because of the way they've limited the licenses, and even though a licensee can have multiple dispensaries, they can't locate more than one in a county. So, as I said, there's like, my math is 37 statewide. There's 5 integrated facilities which can operate dispensaries. And I don't think all their operations have to be at the same site, but they have, they can each have 5 dispensaries, so that's 25. But one licensee can only have 1 in a county. And then there's 4 dispensary licenses, and they can each have 3, which makes a total of 12. But again, they can only locate 1 per county. So, like I said, that's where I get my 25, my 12, 37 statewide, but the maximum you could have in any one county would be 9, because you've got 5 and 4 that can have 1 per county. There are some provisions in the regulations that allow licensees to ask for some extraordinary relief. They refer to waivers, and temporary waivers, or temporary, they call them variances. It's not the same thing as a zoning variance, but the licensees can request the commission to give them some relief in certain circumstances. I don't know if that number per county will be an issue or not. Right now, there are not 37 counties that have authorized them, or not even 37 counties plus cities that have taken the step that that the council took a couple of weeks ago. So, but again, the number of licenses is a maximum. I don't think the commission's required to issue them all. So.
Okay, so we may be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And Councilor Abbott, to your earlier question, our goal would be, unless we have major changes to make, we would like to set the public hearing for November 29th. That's the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. So that would give any applicants right at 1 month to get their application together to submit it to the state by December 30th.
Okay.
So that was kind of our goal, to have all this put together.
Well, so after people have discussed it at the Thanksgiving dinner table, they can come to the public hearing the next Tuesday.
Or they'll be so full they won't need to come at all.
Okay, so the only thing that I'm concerned about is I wouldn't want any changes that have to do with zoning to be made after we've approved it. But if all the changes are typos and oopses, then I'm fine with approving it now.
I would say that if we find anything that could make some change, to the, I don't think there's going to be anything major, but if when we do our final, review and put it together, if anything comes up, then definitely we would make the committee aware of it, and, I guess would leave that to you, Madam Chair, as to, whether it's something that needed to come back to the full committee, or we can talk to committee members individually and see, if it's an issue. and, that the full committee needs to discuss, or if it's just like, hey, we found this one little thing, we want to correct this, and just get kind of, but I would say we should be able to keep them in the loop. We're not going to just go, oh, surprise, here's a completely different ordinance than what you saw. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Right, with our goal being to have a final draft of the ordinance ready to submit next Wednesday for the next week's council meeting. So we will be in touch with you guys if there's any significant issues that come up between now and next week.
Okay. Councilor Woods, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, that's fine. Like I said, we feel like we're always rushing for one reason or another without knowing the underlying reasoning for what the big rush is. But I'm comfortable with what they've talked about, and as long as there's no substantive changes, I move approval.
Okay, I'll second that with the caveat that if any zoning-oriented changes are made, that we be apprised of that and can at least consider it in committee. So I have seconded, you have firsted, and we are ready to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
So we have passed it, and we're on the slippery slope.
One step closer. Well, we'll have to worry about the state getting more progressive than Birmingham, so.
Well, the best thing about this is that so many other states have already been through it, that hopefully all of the mistakes have been made and we can just copy what other people have done, but you never know about that.
Yeah, the mistake a lot of them made was not limiting the number, and so they went back, some of them went back and limited the number after the fact. But.
Yeah. Okay, well, anything else to come before us? Mr. Gambrell, should we talk about those other things during our committee meeting, the form-based code question that I sent to you? And
I was just going to reply to you.
Oh, okay. Well, then we are ready to adjourn if there's nothing else to be discussed.
Will we adjourn?
Second, all in favor say aye. Aye. So we are adjourned.